Hi everyone, welcome to this new episode of You Gotta Act, a podcast about actors and acting. Today we have a special guest, our first woman on the show, I have to say. It's Catherine Bray.
Hello, I didn't know I was first lady of the podcast.
Exactly.
That's exciting news, Manny.
Exactly.
Are we calling you Manny, or is that just us as friends?
Everybody can call me what they want, except bad names. You can call me Manny if you want.
Well, I'm honoured to be on your podcast. Who would have guessed that when I started my career in 2004, this was all where it was leading up to?
I mean, I didn't know either in 2004 that this would happen, so there we are. Catherine, so you decided to talk about the actress Kathy Burke. But before we get into that, can you tell us a bit more about your journey into film? Because I didn't say, but you're a producer, director. You have so many titles. So if you can just explain a bit what it's all about.
Yeah. Producer, commissioner, soldier, spy. I have been working for a really long time, and I keep sort of changing a little bit what I do. It's always been within film, but I started out in magazines. Remember those? Lovely late lamented title called Hot Dog, which was kind of sort of a little bit like a lads mag with a focus on cult films. That was kind of the vibe. We would put like Robert De Niro on the cover, or Robert Downey Jr. promoting Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, stuff like that. I was the first lady there as well. It's the first female staff writer they hired. Wow. I was 21, fresh out of college, and what a job that was, flying around the world. Got to go to Moscow and New York and interviewed Jake Gyllenhaal. It was a really great time.
I didn't know you actually like traveled the world. Like, 'cause me, when I started writing, it was literally like being sent screeners for terrible French films and writing them in my bed after uni. But you actually like did the full critic job, which is cool.
I think there were probably two halves of that. I mean, the first was that I was lucky enough to be on staff. I mean, like, the money was almost nothing, but it didn't matter because the job was so exciting. And then the other half of that is the little thing called the global financial crisis that came along in 2008, and I think made film journalism a lot less fun, because they just used to have better budgets available to send people to places. And I mean, I remember the New York trip to interview Jake Gyllenhaal that I mentioned. Like, that was, it was, and this was standard at the time. It was, oh, you can spend $100 a day on your room allowance, courtesy of the studio.
God.
That kind of perk. It was a wild time. And of course, at that time, all I was hearing was, oh, you should have been here 10 years ago. Things were really luxurious then.
I mean, they probably were, but yeah, that's amazing. What was the film you talked to Jake about? Jake Gyllenhaal.
Jarhead. That was our cover story. A bit of time with Jamie Foxx as well. Nice. It was a good time.
Nice.
My first assignment on that magazine was a Lord of the Rings all-nighter at the IMAX.
Nothing has changed then.
It wasn't all glamour.
But I mean, like, that's still like your favorite pastime. Lord of the Ring.
Yeah, COVID permitting, on the 27th of December, I'll be going to the Prince Charles cinema to watch all of the Lord of the Rings films. They're not very carefully not calling that a marathon, because they're making sure that it clears the cinema in between the films so that they can recycle the air, do a full clean, mop down the seats. Honestly, regardless of COVID, they should have done that at the IMAX in Waterloo all of that time ago, because it got pretty ripe in there, sitting all night watching Lord of the Rings.
That's true. The Prince Charles is not the most air-conditioned place. Sorry, I went on a tangent, but after writing for Hot Dog, then what happened for you?
So there was that little financial crisis. Hot Dog went under, and I took a job up in Birmingham looking after something called For Talent for Channel 4 out of an independent production company, Maverick Television. That was basically, I mean, although the financial crisis was in full swing by that point, that was another job that was just an enormous amount of fun. We went to music festivals around the world. Essentially, the point of that job was to find up-and-coming talent in sort of every aspect of the media. So we were working with musicians, we were working with people who wanted to make films, we were working with multi-platform artists, podcasters, all of that good stuff. So not famous people, but people excited to be at the start of their careers, and as we were as well. Like that entire team was people in their mid-20s.
Right.
What a wonderful thing for Channel 4 to have funded. And we hit up some good people who've gone on to have kind of really interesting careers. It's always really nice when you're in a job like that, when you sort of think, oh yeah, that person's probably got it, and then in 10 years they're like headlining a show for Channel 4.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that was my first toe in commissioning, which I then left behind for a number of years running Film 4 Digital, which was another sort of more journalistic role. And that was really when I got into going to film festivals, because our role was to support through editorial Film 4's releases. So that entailed obviously going to Cannes and all of the big festivals. And what a wonderful time. That was during Tessa Ross's reign at Film 4. So she discovered, among many other people, Steve McQueen, and supported all of his films to date, I think. Under the Skin, that poster you can see behind me, Under the Skin, was one of the releases we were working on in that period of my life.
Amazing.
And Ex Machina, stuff like that. So that was the bit of my career where it was really about getting my head around publicity and marketing and digital editorial and social. I was the voice behind Film 4's Twitter account for more years than I care to recall.
What a responsibility.
Yeah, and then more commissioning. I did 3 or 4 years commissioning Random Acts for Channel 4, which is their short film strand. That was a very hectic job because we were looking after 80 direct commissions, so 80 short films to commission per year. And you can imagine how many films you turn down in order to find that 80. So, you know, if it's 10, then that's 800, but it wasn't 10, it was more than that. So you're looking at thousands of pictures a year in a role like that, which is, exhausting. But in parallel to those sort of more official mortgage paying jobs, I've also been running my own company with a filmmaker called Charlie Shackleton and a filmmaker called Anthony Ing, and we make lots of sort of relatively low budget movies, including one called Beyond Clueless, which was all about teen movies. That came out in 2015. It was an essay film, a documentary. We made one called Fear Itself about horror movies in 2015, and a lot of shorts. Fish Story, which is about whether a guy called Casper Salmon, who I believe you used to live with.
I did. I'm still in touch with him.
Whether it was really true or total bullshit that in the 80s in Anglesey, an aquarium invited all of the local people of Anglesey with fish-related surnames to open their aquarium, and that this was presided over by Michael Fish, the weatherman, and that all of these people also received a version of their fish as a gift. So the salmon's got a salmon, the pike's got a pike. This was this story that he always told in the pub, and we turned it into a film. You have to watch the film to find out if that's true or not.
It's a really amazing film. It's so beautiful. I love the idea of immortalizing Casper into a movie like that. It's beautiful. Yeah.
His legacy on this earth is that short.
And it's just such a typical example of Casper as well. Like he would just tell stories and be funny just by being himself, and he really is.
A fantastic raconteur. He claims at the start of the film not to be a raconteur, but I don't know anybody who more fulfills the definition of raconteur.
Exactly. Cool.
I think that's mostly me. Oh, well, I'm head of arts at Little Dot Studios now, so I look after Inside Cinema for the BBC, which is a short films taking you to the heart of the movies, is our log line, and that is essay videos. So we kicked that off with one that I wrote on women in red in film, which was a trope I'd sort of noticed and found really appealing. You've seen this a million times, watch the essay if you would like to find out more, but it's stuff like the girl in red in The Matrix walking through the crowd, and Neo's like,
and what it means. Yeah, I love
so we do movies like that on different kind of tricks and techniques in film, tropes people have noticed. It's a really, really fun series. I think we've done over 50 of those now.
Yeah, wow. I didn't realize there was so many. Cool. Yeah, so, and then the film you directed yourself was actually kind of an essay film, which Alessandro and I are also doing, like, we're making essay films and stuff. But that was kind of like.
Cool. What's yours about? Can you say?
Oh yeah. It's a sort of essay film about a film. So it's like it accompanies the restoration of this Armenian film called The Lighthouse. And I feel like you guys, you and Charlie and Anthony, have been super inspiring for that, because you just went and made those great essay films that are super insightful. Like, so the one you made more recently, the feature length one, Meet the Family. I actually helped you first with the voiceover for that, but then you got Kathy Burke to do the legit version, and so you actually worked with her. And can you tell us how that happened and how was it?
Yeah. So this film is a 60-minute film that I made for BBC4, and it was the first time that I'd written and directed anything of that length at all. So it was quite a nerve-wracking thing to do. And I think, to begin with, I was focused on the argument of the film, but the closer you get to the end of the film, the more you're thinking, okay, who voices this? And a lot of video essayists voice their own work. That doesn't really work for me. I don't want to listen to myself for an hour.
I don't either.
Good luck on the podcast, guys. But yeah, I think in documentary it's really easy to default to certain kinds of voice. So I always sort of had it in my head that I didn't want a kind of Stephen Fry voice. Not because I don't like Stephen Fry. I mean, Stephen Fry is wonderful. And to be honest, if he turned up knocking on my door saying, I want to voice one of your documentaries, of course I would say yes. But his style of voice is very prevalent in the British broadcast media. Totally. And I felt like, in particular, women, there are not enough women voicing narration in documentary. I'm not sure why. I think there are maybe some sort of deeply culturally embedded bits of received wisdom about authority and who has authority, and it's always nice to challenge those kinds of preconceived notions when you have the chance. So I knew that it would be a woman, but it didn't really start to sort of crystallize into Kathy until I watched Nil by Mouth as research for the film, because the brilliant thing about essay films is you don't sort of script them rigidly in advance and then go away and make the film. They're this constant process of finding new clips that better suit that bit of the argument, or finding that you need to put a point a different way and actually a different film will sell that better. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking at Nil by Mouth as something that might have come into Meet the Family. It actually didn't in the end, but it made me think, Kathy Burke could be interesting, because the film is about family and how family is represented on film. And family is this universal thing, so it's been represented in lots of really different ways on film. You've got sort of broad, raucous comedies, the kind of cheaper by the dozen type family movie, Christmas with the Clumps, whatever, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then you've also got super serious kind of award-winning world cinema, all of that side of things. And so I really wanted the voice to be somebody who can move elegantly through all of those different sorts of story worlds. And that's another sort of moment of thinking, well, who has the range that Kathy Burke has? This is a woman who can play the Buddhist of broad comedy in something like Gimme, 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 and can win Best Actor at Cannes for her work in Nil by Mouth, this incredibly sort of heartrending portrayal of an abused woman. And then I also thought, like, actually it's quite good in these sorts of films to have, you do need the critical authority, and that shouldn't come from the traditional markers of authority, but it helps with an essay film if you feel that the person talking to you knows what they're talking about. So I think you almost wouldn't want to cast an actor who's just known for acting. You want to cast someone who's got a bit of writing and directing experience too, at least for a film like this. And Kathy has that as well. Is there anything this woman can't do? I'd recently seen a play that she'd directed, written by Sam Bain, who co-created and co-wrote Peep Show, amongst many, many other brilliant things. And it was really interestingly done. And I love the idea that she makes stuff happen as projects as well. So yeah, it all of these different things kind of snowballed into, we've got to get Kathy Burke. I don't know what I'm going to do if we don't get Kathy Burke.
Right. No, you're right. It makes total sense. I mean, I was very unfamiliar with her before you mentioned her as the person you wanted to talk about. But yeah, looking at what she's done, she's really covered everything. And it seems that it's interesting because it seems that she became very famous for her comedy work on television, with British comedies that I had never heard of, but where she plays kind of funny, very broad and like kind of in a gross way, but she plays people in the family and she plays with family dynamics, and she does that, from what I've seen, well. I mean, obviously it's a kind of a parodic register, but it's good. Is that where you first discovered her, or in those comedies, or?
Yes, yeah. So if you grew up in Britain in the sort of 80s, 90s, 2000s, you've probably seen Kathy Burke, even if you're not kind of, if you wouldn't immediately call her to mind on hearing her name, because she's been in so many sitcoms and sketch shows. I think the first thing I would have seen her in would have been Harry Enfield and Chums. She's played almost every conceivable family member in that, actually, in different sketches. It's not related people. It's not a Clumps situation. Although I would watch a Clumps style video where Kathy Burke played all of the different characters.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, so she, in Harry Enfield and Chums, she plays a baby that's always getting kind of like bullied horrifically and physically by her toddler brother. She plays Waynetta Slob, who is a kind of working class caricature of it's sort of, I don't know, it's the kind of comedy that might get taken to task now, but I would say it comes from a legitimate place, because Kathy Burke herself is legitimately working class, and if she wants to play a stereotype of that, I think she should be allowed to do whatever she wants.
Yeah.
She also plays the teenager Perry. Kevin and Perry is actually a Harry Enfield and Chums sketch that got turned into a movie because it was so popular, sort of breakout thing. And she plays this teenage boy who's kind of awkward and surly and rude. And then as soon as his mate's parents are in the room, he becomes incredibly polite, which I really, really remember from so many of my friends, just sort of giving it all this as like the rebel. And then as soon as somebody's parents in the room, it's like, yes, Mr. Passon, no, Mr. Passon. It's really lovely capturing of that kind of. I think she does a better job than most grown men would do of that. So yeah, it was her comedy. I think that if I had to pick one Kathy Burke kind of broad comedy moment that would sort of hopefully sell anybody on this woman's comic chops, timing and brilliance, it would be her work in Absolutely Fabulous.
I watched clips of that and she was very good.
So good, yeah. Beloved British sitcom, also subjected to them turn it into a movie treatment a few years ago. But for me, the sort of first two series on telly are probably the classics, tapping into a thing that we don't get to see women doing often enough, of just being the raucous, misbehaving, drunken nightmare people that, you know, men in Adam Sandler type comedies get to play all of the time, and they're usually being reined in by their beautiful, well-meaning wife. Absolutely Fabulous is not that. It's Jennifer Saunders plays a kind of useless PR boss person, and Joanna Lumley plays her sidekick Patsy, who's kind of a drag character. I mean, they're so popular in the drag world, but yeah, she's this promiscuous, chain smoking, she's probably in her 50s pretending to be in her 30s, leather miniskirt wearing bouffant Ivana Trump hairdo person. Adore her. And Kathy, it's actually not like a main role in this. She only pops up every so often, but she plays the magazine boss that they're all in some way beholden to. I'm not quite sure how that all ties together on a plausible level, but she sweeps into the room, orders people about, has like a motor mouth, you know, when sort of people talk so fast that you think, how is this actor even actually remembering all of this? Never mind making it funny. It's almost a kind of physical feat of virtuoso performance. And yeah, she just owns it completely. You know, that thing of people in magazine world where it's not about being inherently conventionally good looking. Like, they don't necessarily look like a model.
Yeah.
I think maybe Anna Wintour is a good example of this, but the hair is so on point, the clothes are so on point, the confidence is there. Like, you see it in Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada as well. She really captures it. It's just that thing of like, this person is in charge, and you know, even before they've opened their mouth, that they're in charge. She's really parodies that in such an effective way. Also just sweary and smoking cigarettes and drinking, and I love that. I love a bit of bad behavior on television.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, from what I've seen of her, so like, she could play parodic character in TV shows, but she also there's some kind of like extreme realism to her. Like, she's not funny because she's trying to be funny. And also when she's in Nil by Mouth, which is a pretty, like, it's kind of kitchen sink like realism, she has the same approach, and it works as well. Like, because like you were saying, for instance, Absolutely Fabulous, it could be sometimes, like, it could be forced, but she's not. She doesn't ever do that. And it's interesting that she still became this comedic hero with that style.
I think she's someone, and I wouldn't sort of speculate in detail about her private life or anything, but I think she's someone who has genuinely come into contact with a real range of people across her life. And I think if you're an actor who has been to private school and then gone to Oxford and RADA, and you have never been out in the world, and I won't say the real world because all of these worlds are real, but if you've never experienced a variety, then you have less to draw on. You're cut off from plenty of sources of possible realism I mean, it depends how you approach acting. Obviously, Manny, you're a trained actor, so I don't really know what I'm talking about here. You'll have to course correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that there's such a difference between actors who think this is about what I am going to look like how does someone look when they're sad? I'm going to, play that. And people who have a real reference point for sort of, okay, I know someone who was like that, and how would they be feeling if this was happening, and really finding their way into the emotion coming from within, if that's not too pretentious a thing to say.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think, like you say, because she's probably, I mean, like you said, she's from a working class background, and she played quite a few working class people. So she comes at it from the perspective of, these are real people. These are not caricatures. Of course, in this show, I am playing a parody of them, but I know that they're real. So she doesn't need to go look for a fake or a parodic version. She starts from the real thing and then makes it funnier, maybe. But I think you're totally right. And I think it's an awareness of difference between people, and it's a respect, which I think especially in the acting world, I mean, we all know that it's a pretty privileged thing. Like, if you know people, it's easier. And if you come from a working class background, which is rarer and rarer, you don't have all that to help you, and you have more, like, you're kind of coming at it from a purer place, and it seems to be the case with her.
Yeah, there's such a difference to if you were a portrait painter, even if you were trying to paint an exaggerated caricature of somebody, if you've got that person in front of you, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier than if you've only heard about what that person is like or seen other caricatures.
Yeah,
I think it's sort of that. And then, of course, we should say that Kathy hasn't just played working class characters. She's also played, Mary, Queen of Scots, and Connie in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. But that by that stage in her career, she's obviously interacted with a shit ton of posh people because she's been on film sets. And
True.
Cannes Film Festival, and it's. I think it's much easier to kind of broaden your experience in that direction after you get into acting than it is to get into acting and then try to broaden your experience. I mean, you do, obviously, actors will do this thing of like, oh, I went and lived for 6 months in a flat in Basingstoke, aren't I brave? And it's like, well, how embedded were you? How real is that?
Yeah.
yeah, it's
yeah,
I don't know. It's a fine line, because I'm not saying people should just play what their own background is at all. But you can see where Kathy or other actors like her would have a head start in being able to create somebody like, well, I mean, so all of her characters are brilliant, but like Waynetta Slob coming from Helena Bonham Carter would not be as interesting to me as Waynetta Slob coming from Kathy Burke. In fact, that would be a nightmare. I don't want to see that.
Is it true that at some point Helena Bonham Carter wrote something in a newspaper about how difficult it was to be an actress when you're from a middle class background, and Kathy Burke replied just like "shut the fuck up" or something? Is that why you made that reference?
I'm sure this is something that Kathy's probably kind of fed up of having brought up every time people talk about her, but it is amazing, and you can see why people bring it up. It was, I think, as I understand it, actually, they've sort of, made up and talked this through, or it's sort of peaceful now or something. But basically, at the time, Helena Bonham Carter, at the sort of beginning of her career, when she, this English rose, super gorgeous. It was probably soon after or around the time that she and Kenneth Branagh were going out. He used to go out with Emma Thompson, and then switched, I think, on set to Helena Bonham Carter. And she was talking in an interview about how difficult it is to be beautiful and upper class because people don't take you seriously. And Kathy wrote into Time Out, I think. I don't think she was asked about it. She wrote into Time Out, "Shut the fuck up, you stupid cunt," something along those lines.
I understand from both sides, though. Like, I understand what Helena Bonham Carter meant as well, and obviously I understand what Kathy Burke meant. But I guess it's also just difficult if you're a woman, straight up, like whatever woman you are, and there's less of a
life is difficult. Everybody has difficulties that they come up against. The most privileged people in the world go through intense pain and difficulty, and it's not even about like establishing a ranking system or something, but I think to sort of almost, I think we just have to own our privilege, as annoying as it may be. And I completely understand, like, as a woman, like, there are times when maybe somebody favored you for your looks, and I know that there will be times when people kind of favored me for my whiteness in unconscious ways. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sit there and go like, oh, there are so many film schemes available now for like disabled filmmakers. Where are my film schemes? It's like all the other film schemes are my film schemes. It's
very good. I agree. Yeah. Now to go back to Kathy a bit, what I think is interesting as well, comparing her to Helena Bonham Carter, maybe, is that she's always owned up to herself and to what she looks like, which I know sounds terrible, but basically her point was always that she didn't try to change what she looked like. She didn't try to fit into any mold. And in the end, that turned out to be a great move. I mean, obviously we all like authenticity, but you think sometimes that the industry does not. And I find it interesting for that. She's inspiring in that way as well.
Yeah, she did a really good doc series with Channel 4, I think it was last year. And one of the episodes was on beauty, and she goes to this cosmetic surgeon who sort of draws lines on her face and says, like, look, we would change this, this, and this. And she's, very like, well, I like my face. Why would I want to conform more in this direction? I mean, I find that stuff so challenging, like this sort of idea that you could look more like what we're told everybody likes to look at. And to resist that, I think, shows real strength and character. And it's something I think more and more about as I get older. I'm in the target demographic for sort of age-related tweaks and all of this kind of thing, and trying to kind of, decide where the line is between putting moisturizer on and changing your face, I think is an interesting one. I don't know. I think it's so cool that Kathy is just strong enough to be like, no, fuck it. I don't need to let those insecurities in. And I'm also not trying to paint her as Superwoman, because I'm sure as a human being, she has moments at different ends of the spectrum in regards to all of that.
For sure. But it's interesting also in terms of as an actress that her trying to not trying to fit into something actually allowed her to do many different things. Because playing a teenage boy, I mean, you could question, you know, nowadays, like you were saying, like whether that's okay or whatever. But like for what the show was about, it's brilliant. And she's very good at playing a teenage boy. And you know, it's kind of this thing that we say sometimes of actually women understand men better because they spend their lives observing them and trying to figure out what they're doing. And in that sense, I think she really proved that right, for instance. And it's all because she looked a certain way at that age that she could play a teenage boy very convincingly. And that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think if you're conventionally attractive and you're trying to play humor, maybe that's one area where conventionally attractive people actually do have it more difficult, because it means power, and power isn't funny unless it's being undermined.
Exactly. Yeah,
there's
totally.
a vulnerability to looking slightly you know, I mean, I say unconventional. I think Kathy Burke is gorgeous, but within the world of all of that,
exactly.
Yeah, not looking like Helena Bonham Carter, say.
One thing I've been wondering, looking at all these clips of her in comedies and all that, is and also coming from outside the British culture, because I only moved here 7 years ago. What is your perspective now on this kind of comedic acting she did, of this comedy of stereotypes? Like, do you think it was, and maybe it's a boring conversation, but do you think it was good for British culture? Like, what's the place of that in British culture, do you think?
Well, I think there's such a huge difference between somebody like David Walliams in Little Britain playing a character where it feels quite clearly like he's punching down, and a loving tribute to a character type. And I wouldn't say, obviously, that something like Harry Enfield and Chums or Gimme, Gimme, Gimme always got it right by the standards of today. But guess what? All your faves right now that everyone's going, oh, that show gets it. There's going to be something in there that in 20 years' time people are saying, my goodness, I can't believe that was happening. I think when people judge sort of stuff from the past as if we've got it right now and things will never change, you've got to leave room for there to have been mistakes, as long as intentions were sort of pure and human.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's stuff in Gimme, Gimme, Gimme that hasn't necessarily aged well, which is a shame. But I would always want to defend something that was trying to go big, make us laugh. That's a show that put a woman, Kathy, and I think his name's James Dreyfus, we should check that, playing a very camp man at the heart of a sitcom at a time when those people weren't necessarily getting to be the leads in sitcoms. So, you know, is it perfect if you run it through a filter of, well, does this representation advance this, that, the other cause? Like, no, it's not perfect on those terms.
Yeah.
But stereotypes have been tied into comedy since like the beginning of comedy. I think it would be very hard to eliminate them entirely, and you wouldn't always want to, because they're a useful shorthand. Like humor that relies on that idea of, you know, the thing I'm talking about, haven't we all experienced this? That's a sort of form of stereotyping. When you say, oh, we've all done this, that's a form of stereotyping. I mean, almost that idea of when we sort of see an aspect of our culture in something and say, they got me, I feel seen, that's very like me. That's almost a sort of positive response to a stereotype, or it can be, because it's that idea that we all have these things in common. And stereotypes are about an idea of similarity. I mean, there can be negative stereotypes and there can be hideous stereotypes, and some incredibly awful stuff has come out of stereotypes. But I think to sort of think of them as inherently bad misses a lot of the sort of shortcut to the truth that they could be. It's a bit like caricatures, I guess. If you look at a really witty cartoon caricature of somebody, that can tell you more about them than a photograph would, even though the photograph is more accurate and realistic. And I think a good stereotype can operate in the same way in humor.
Totally. And that's kind of what Kathy Burke has been doing as well. Like, if you look at like Neil by Mouth, is Neil by Mouth telling you more about the reality of this class of people in South London than maybe, you know, Kevin Perry Go Large? You know, it's just a different register, but it's like, and I know it's different places, whatever, but it's a different register that aims kind of at the same thing, is to say something true about us, about people. And I think that's kind of what makes Kathy Burke, even if, like, I watched some clips from Kevin and Perry and I was kind of not disgusted, but I was like, this isn't gross, I don't like it, that's me. But like, even then, I wasn't like upset, you know, I wasn't mad at her, because I understood somewhere that there was a genuine desire to show something true in a funny way, but it was based on honesty in a way.
Yeah, and it's always really important to be able to tell the difference between I didn't like this thing, or this thing was sort of disgusting, and this thing should stop and never be made again.
Yeah. I didn't
for me,
feel
there's
that.
a big gap
Yeah,
between those
totally.
ideas.
Totally. And also that I was reminded of this acceptance speech of hers that you sent me, and it's
Yeah.
brilliant, where she kind of talks about what we were saying, like she's very happy, and she explains that finally she got an award, like, for fuck's sake, you know, she finally got it. And also, you know, everybody who's been watching the show loved it, but obviously the critics, or, you know, the fancy people, they don't respect it. And it's so brave that she just went and said that, and she was right.
It's not protocol at all, is it? She's just one for gimme, gimme, gimme. Most of the people in the room are like comedy producers, BBC executives, you know, people from Channel 4, people working on sort of more critically respectable shows. I think it's the time of The Office, which obviously then everybody wanted to copy this kind of really lo-fi, really realistic. It's not punchlines, it's not big characters. That was in vogue, and then gimme, gimme, gimme wins this award. It was not the choice of kind of comedy fashion at the time, and I'm sure the protocol would have been for her to get up there and very humbly sort of say, well, you know, the audience loved it, and that's really all that matters to me. But she's sort of getting up there and be like, yeah, you know, screw you guys who didn't like this show, I believe in it. Which is really lovely, because I think there's also a way that you could do that and come off just really embittered. Like I've seen awards show recipients sometimes where they sort of use that platform almost to be like, and I knew I was right.
Yeah.
All
exactly.
along, I believed in this thing. And she's not doing that either. It's just a bit sort of, it's a bit cheeky and it's fun and it's very, very her. Yeah, it's lovely.
Totally. So when I did some research on her, I found that she decided some years ago now to stop acting as much and instead focus on directing theater. And obviously I haven't been able to find clips or anything of that, but apparently she's been extremely busy with that. And you said you saw some play that she did and you said it was brilliant. And I'm wondering now, like, if the fact that she's got such an open mind, not open mind, that sounds weird, but she's got such an curiosity and openness and genuine nature towards, yeah, like we said, all kinds of people and all kinds of genres as well. I'm guessing that makes her especially apt to do theater and to do all kinds of plays and put up plays, and also because she's a brilliant actress. Like, it seems like a perfect continuation of what she's been doing.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, like so many actors hit that point in their career where they go, right, now I should direct. Sometimes it's a very thoughtful decision. Sometimes they think it's a thoughtful decision, but actually it's more of a sort of like, it just feels like the thing that they ought to do next, or it's a status thing. I think you sometimes see that on long-running shows and dramas where like the star gets to direct an episode, and sometimes that's brilliant, and sometimes it's like clearly a nightmare. And the poor producers are probably having to do most of the directing work. But yeah, I think, you know, with Kathy that it's not that, because of the kinds of projects she's picking. Like, she's not picking the kinds of projects where your name flashes up in the big show. I mean, she has directed telly as well, but yeah, it's feels like the projects she's guided by are ones that would be interesting, ones where it would work well with the cast. I mean, I obviously can't speak for her, but yeah, the show that I saw at the Finsbury Park Theatre, it starred Adam Deacon, and I think it was his first professional gig since having some mental health issues. And I think coming back into acting after that kind of thing must be really tricky on both a personal and a professional level, because this is an industry that's incredibly risk averse, and that idea that somebody represents a risk for whatever reason, unless they're like an A-list star and they're Lindsay Lohan and people are still casting them even though they're never going to show up to set, I think it's just like an enormous uphill thing. And for Kathy and Sam Bain to sort of take this very talented actor, Adam Deacon, I don't know if you've seen him in much. He's
not sure.
He gets cast as kind of gangstery, Londony kinds of people. He was in Babylon, the Danny Boyle directed police dramedy, I think you'd call it, like sort of quite funny but also quite serious.
Okay.
About London police. But yeah, anyway, a talented actor, deserved a second chance, and Kathy is one of the people who gave him one. So yeah, I think there's a lovely mission there, and it doesn't seem to be guided by ego.
And it's also interesting because she got that Cannes Award for Nil by Mouth when she was fairly young. I mean, it was kind of her first big movie, kind of, written by her friend Gary Oldman. And, and she went from that to starring in bigger things like Elizabeth. But then eventually, of her own decision, she decided to stop acting. Like there's a very... And it's not because, she was harassed by fans. I mean, she wasn't, I'm guessing. She probably was recognized. But it's a very, humbling thing to think about, that you can start feeling like the job becomes something else. I listened to that Desert Island Discs episode of hers that you recommended, and she says that very well. She says that she started coming to set and not liking it. And she was like, I can't possibly do this. And she stopped. And when do you see that, I mean, and in a way, she still kept her career. I mean, she definitely did, but she still has a longevity because she's still around. She's making things. It's not her turning her back on everything. And I think she handled that super well. And it's for someone who came from where she came from and all that, I think she's kind of established herself really well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it, when people step away from the thing that's supposed to be the only thing that you could possibly want. It shows a real sort of self-knowledge that, on the one hand, who better equipped to know oneself than oneself? But the number of people that don't, or that kind of act according to outside pressures around what they are supposed to want from life, is staggeringly high. So, and I think it's sort of rare that people kind of are doing something that's perceived to be the thing, whatever that is. Might not even be in the realms of fame and profile, but yeah, people walking away from what our society tells us success looks like is a really interesting category to me. I think you find some good people there. It's sort of the same sort of category as people who turn down knighthood.
Yeah. I was reading about that the other day, actually, and I found a lot of people I think like David Bowie turned down something twice, and I'm like, yeah, brilliant. But yeah.
You're in such good company if you turn down an honour from the Queen. Like, all the best people have turned them down.
Yeah.
And you're in really shit company if you accept them.
Yeah, because so many random people accepted them and you don't even know who they are. Yeah, totally. All right.
Honestly, the classic, like, oh, but my mum would never forgive me. Like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not having it. You want to do it. Like, think of all of the other things that you have done that your mum probably would never forgive you for, like going off on a film shoot for Christmas or whatever it is. All of these very successful people who supposedly never let down their mum. I don't buy it for a moment.
Good point. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've covered it. And Kathy Burke has a long career, but I think we talked a lot about kind of all the different aspects of it, and I could tell you really like her and you really know her, so that was a brilliant discovery for me. So thank you so much for that as well.
Thank you so much, Manny, for inviting me on your podcast as First Lady.
First Lady. yeah, we'll try and do better, but this is the industry we work in as well. That's kind of what I meant when I brought up the fact that you're the first lady here. It's not because I don't like women, obviously. Kind of, yeah. But it's a difficult thing for everyone, like you said. So let's all try and do better and to the best of our abilities.
Amen.
Amen. All right. See you later.
Ending it on a religious note for some reason.
Yeah. This is how it is. I never know how it's gonna end. So yeah. Well, thanks so much, and thanks for your time. And speak soon.
Speak soon. I hope so.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of You Gotta Act. Find us on social media at You Gotta Act and let us know what you think. See you next time.